If humans' average lifespan was 1000 years, what jobs and businesses would there be that we don't have now? Multi-century investment schemes. Imagine investing in a moon base in 2100, then retiring to your moon mansion in 3000 because you're getting up there in years and your bones can't handle normal gravity all that well. Or investing in a Dyson swarm because the ROI would be insane and you could spare a few centuries to wait for your investment to mature. Retirement on the moon sounds fun. Interesting question. So much would be different. I imagine youth would be considered anything under 100, or something along those lines. Also, it might be normal to change careers throughout your lifetime. Also, how long would someone be viable? That is, at what point would they absolutely have to stop working for health reasons? Would they start to get dementia and other issues at 800? If so, that would greatly expand the elderly care industry. Conversely, if people make it to like 990 until they need help, then elderly services would be a very small industry. Family reunions would be huge though. I think continuous education would be sufficiently more important. Think of how people over 70 struggle to keep up with modern computers. Now imagine more than half of adults were born before the modern concept of democracy. Good lord, imagine what the Supreme Court would look like. They would all be 900 plus years old. 500-year mortgages. I guess houses would have to be made out of superwood or something. Longevity for everything would have to be better, so all our materials would have to be stronger. The mortgage would be for the land, not the house itself. Memory services. Essentially, you would hire people to meet up with you on occasion to go over the past week, month, year of your life, and they would write it all down for you so you could remember it. There would probably be tiers of service like daily writers to manual writers, and probably options of written memories to video memories. You could make a cool book out of this about a guy with his job that starts having mild psychosis and throughout time doesn't know what memories belong to him or his customers, and the entire thing is told from his fricked up point of view. I think population control would be a stated and accepted goal of every government, and there would be a massive state apparatus for determining who gets to have children and when. It would have to be. Imagine if the people born right after the Battle of Hastings were still alive, consuming resources. You couldn't let everyone breed at will. It would be every issue the modern world has with overpopulation, urban sprawl and pollution, but in overdrive. I think risk aversion and risk prevention services would be a bigger industry. Okay, sure, you want to use a car, but that's too unsafe. You may die 400 years from your prime. Just walk instead. Walking from Buenos Aires to Toronto could be described as a pleasant 2 years adventure vacation. A Civil War veteran would be considered a young whippersnapper by the middle-aged founding fathers, who themselves would be regaled with stories about the good old days during the Crusades from the old men eating at Golden Corral. So my answer is buffets would certainly still be a thing. The only thing that I think that would be different is that recycling businesses would be different in that they'd actually be recycling. If you knew you'd actually be around to see all the degradation to the environment, you'd actually change it. The effect is probably different for a person who is 500 years old and digs up a plastic container from his past and remembers throwing it out 400 years earlier. You'd consider trees to be pets, and there would be conversations like, I remember my first tree and you gotta look after it. A tree is for life, not just for a decade. Global warming would be something we'd control on purpose. We'd plan for a nice hot period 300 years from now and then bring it back, because who has the wardrobe for that weather all decade long, am I right? But for jobs specifically, probably interplanetary bus driver, it will take 7 months to get to Mars. So for someone whose job is to shuttle people back and forth, they gotta live long, and 1000 years is probably a career of only 600 round trips. Surely spacecraft will be able to travel faster than that though. But I do see the economy being dictated by how much of one's life someone dedicates to their job. Of course, the rich don't do any work. I think pawn shops and antiques would be through the roof. People wanting to get rid of their old stuff for new, and then younger generations wanting the antiques. Like, yup, I've looked at this painting since 1654, I think it's time for something different. We would be years back in technology because we'd still be stuck in superstitions that only died out because the people believing them did. The correct answer: Technology and culture only advances with new ideas, and new ideas only comes with new and younger people. Old people get accustomed to things and ideas from their youth. I'd say that living 10 times more would hold us back 10 times more also. We would still be living in prehistory era. Power would accumulate even more with the old. You think boomers are insufferable now? Imagine someone with 500 more years to accumulate wealth. This is a primary theme in Altered Carbon. Sexual education would be a religion, as in don't have unprotected sex until you're 800-900 years old, or else we will have another food land shortage and mass extinction event like every other generation has had. People would definitely already leave the earth. The short lifespan is a big obstacle on having to fly to another solar system since it results in lots of other issues. Good point. So space travel companies and astronauts and stuff like that would be way more abundant. Pretty sure planet well-being would be a lot more important. So you would have terraformer as a profession, and all the R&D towards changing back the climate effects would have a higher value. Collecting space trash, collecting the Pacific garbage patch, stuff like that. Also space travel would get a huge boost. I wouldn't hire a person less than 300 years old and then you have to work for minutes wage for 100 years before you get a raise and a promotion. Only hire workers with 250 years of experience with a skill or tech that has been around for 50 years. There wouldn't be any type of construction jobs, or jobs that have a high death rate. If so, those jobs would probably pay a lot higher. Or maybe they would be made by people in their 800s who are just short of their retirement, with a lot more safety measures. With a lifespan of 1000 years, I fear that I won't qualify for anything for the first few centuries. Teacher requirement: 300 years experience, super duper master's degree in patience, tolerance and brain deadness, minimum 7 colleges yeeted through with 3.5 GPA. Also, you get paid next to nothing due to inflation over the course of centuries. HR for these 1000-year lives must be fun, too. Imagine the student debt. Does this mean pregnancy lasts about a decade? If so, that is most of the new business. Keeping a pregnancy healthy is hard enough on a 10-month time frame. Borders on madness with a decade time scale. I am not sure about other new businesses, but I think some existing businesses would struggle to exist. Airlines are top of mind. 3 weeks to cross the ocean isn't as bad as you live for a millennium. What about governance? England could still be ruled by Henry VIII or something. The first human and prophet, Adam, is thought to have lived 960 years and stood 60 cubits tall. He was meant to live 1000, but gave 40 of them to one of his descendants. This pops up in Christianity, Judaism and Islam. So there's that, I guess. Just did the quick maths. 60 cubits is 90 feet tall. He's a titan. It's questions like this that make me angry. There are super smart people that have helped humanity progress so much in a short life. Could you imagine what they could have done with more than 10 times the amount of time? What could a normal person do in that time? But I bet that because our perception of time would be different, there wouldn't be big of change. Think of the collaboration that the greats could do together. It could be amazing. Interesting that you say the average lifespan is 1000 years. That means some people will live to 2000 years or more. Education would last longer. Right now Americans are normally in school until they are 17 or 18, and college for 4 years or more beyond that. Other countries are similar. Those numbers would at least double. Similarly, age to vote and drink and possibly drive would rise. Nobody younger than 30, maybe 50, would be taken seriously when they voiced an opinion on serious topics. Ancient history would be something you could interview seniors about. Imagine asking someone what it was like being the son of a Roman legionary for your history paper, and recording the answer on your cell phone. Regarding the actual question, I think environmental sciences would be more advanced. Pollution and environmental change happen too slowly to notice day to day. By the time you're old enough to notice that the forests you grew up near are gone, or other changes, you're probably approaching retirement, if not death. But if you can live 1000 years, you'd notice these changes just when you're getting out of college, which is right when most people's mindsets are most given to making a mark. changing the world, and joining activist causes. They'd still have centuries to look forward to, and they'd notice the trends and work very hard to keep them in check. Perhaps it's just wishful thinking, but I think businesses that clean up the environment would be a significant sector of the work economy, and would face much less resistance by the old guard than they do in the real world. At the same time, certain old industries will be slower to go away. You would be able to find blacksmiths out there even in 2021, for instance, and they wouldn't be artists or recreationists. They'd be catering to a dwindling customer base, but there'd be folk out there who never wanted to learn to drive one of those newfangled automobiles, and I'm sure other trades would fade away slower than they did in the real world, as well. Food, imagine the foods, chefs perfecting their craft for a millennia. The increasing population would be astounding. Assume the current population multiplied by 100. The entire world supporting 800 billion people. Recycling industry would be very much in demand. Highly efficient water recycling and prominent use of grey water systems to reduce energy use of producing drinking water. Plus multiple water use systems in large buildings. Larger buildings would move to an arcology style of building to minimize power usage. Part of the vetting of an apartment complex with the quality of the crops grown with the drain water from the building. The crops grown in the building would be part of the rent and delivered to your door as they are harvested, lowering energy usage because the crops are grown on site. Multiple water use system could include something like this. Drinking water, then drains to building planters, then drains to toilet, then drains to sewer. This gets 3 uses out of the same gallon of water. And this is a simple version of it. More advanced versions could also include septic tanks where the solids are drained to sewer. Part of the wastewater is drained to sewer, and part of the wastewater is drained back to the planters. High nitrogen content. This method requires a lot more care because of the potential of infection due to people urinating STDs and all sorts of other goodies in the sewer lines. Thought 2. You will have industries that are geared towards selling products that can last a lifetime. Thought 3. Rich people become dynasties where the children, their children and their children are all in the family business for hundreds of years. Needless to say, inheritance would be a doozy of a lawsuit. Because of how long people live, they will be expected and required to change jobs every 20 years. This is to prevent companies from becoming ossified by having the same leadership for centuries. And every 20 years out of 100, you are expected and required to take a retirement vacation where you are completely out of the industry for several years, likely a decade, to allow you to completely recover and rehabilitate. And when you come back to work, there is the expectation that you learn a new trade. That new trade can complement your old trade in some way if you want. Maybe you want a slacker century where all you do is be a retail worker after working in high pressure stock sales last century. Because of the length of your life, taking a slacker decade would not be unheard of as you ease back into the workforce. Then learn a new trade, and find ways that the old trade can complement your new trade. Thought 4. Marriage comes with a time limit, like 100 years. You can renew at that time, or go your separate ways, no muss no fuss. Probably none of them because all else being equal, it would put us in direct competition for resources with about 15x as many people as now. And that's assuming we aren't fertile for 15x longer too, in which case we'd make even more people to live 1000 years. Slow down the rate of mutation evolution and make us perpetually vulnerable to all kinds of diseases and conditions we've never heard about. Accelerate the rate of climate change and other ecological horrors to the point where even if we made it to the Industrial Revolution, we certainly would not make it through. Perhaps the more interesting question would be what would have to be true for humans to be able to live 1000 years and for them, and the planet, to still be recognizable to humans as we know them. Century management. Life a life coach for what to do with each century of your life after the first. Invest in your second century, hustle in your third, retire in your fourth and grow a forest in your downtime. Forced sterilization companies. Not rich enough to buy the right to have children? Too bad. Living that long would fill this planet very quickly. I don't think it would change much. If you think about it, human age is all relative. Just like how dog and cat years are calculated based on the lifespan, humans would end up being the same. Our sense of time would speed up, just like a bug that lives for one day might feel like it lived 75 or so years. The only thing that would change is that we would be watching the world around us changing quickly. We would be watching evolution take place over 1 or 2 lifespans, and it would feel like our pets last only a few months and then die. Also, it would kind of suck because the sun would be setting over and over again, and if the day, when the sun is out, is 12 hours long, the day would only feel like 1.2 hours long, considering 1,000-year lifespan is 10 times a 100-year lifespan. I think there would be more jobs related to conserving wildlife, because if time in our minds moves 10 times faster but other wildlife still live short lives, we would need to be very attentive of their needs, otherwise they could all die off very quickly because they would have such short lifespans relative to us. This one takes all the fun out of it. I would like dogs and cats included in this longer life scenario. Long-lived pet stores with tortoises, donkeys, tuataras, parrots, and other long-lived pets. Who really wants to bury 100 good dogs? Is it the same development span and you spend 900-ish years in senility, or like the normal human cycle just spread out over 1,000 years? I would like it to be we age normally to 27 physically, then stay 27 until like 950, then we start aging from 27 to like 60, and anyone living over 1,000 years would be considered old. Like, you know, we consider 65 pretty old, and 70, 80 and 90 is definitely old. That honestly sounds a bit like the movie In Time. I imagine it would be a dystopian paradise with a lot of commercial slave labor and very strict control on who can be born or have kids for those who are part of society. Think about it, 1,000-year lifespan is a very long time for someone to die naturally, so the elite will exploit everyone's time to the fullest or control the lifespan in an artificial way. I think there would be more fricked up industries to please bored rich people who have done everything, like in Altered Carbon. My thought is just about all the craftsmen and artisans who would have hundreds of years to master a craft. Just think about how nice a pair of shoes from a 700-year-old cobbler would be. I think a more established and official chronology would be a thing. Obviously historians write many things down and record significant events, but 1,000 years is a very long time and we don't have much written down from 1021, probably because of literacy rates beyond significant happenings. I can't say what jobs and businesses there would have been, but obviously there would be a lot of people. I mean a load of people. Overpopulation, you know. Cough, genocide. Anti-aging technology for sure. You've seen how crappy some people look when they turn 80. Now imagine the effects of an additional 920 years of gravity on that skin. I am considering 100 of those years to be equal to 10 years of this age. I can't think of a new business, but divorce lawyers will be earning bank. I guess all those annual subscription things would be decadal. Insurance for a year? Nah. Netflix for a year? Man, give me the 5-year pack. Also, people would pursue more than 2-3 careers in their lifetime. Mass Effect did a good job explaining how the Aseri handled their 1,000-year lifespan. Some highlights are that anything under like 200 or so is considered a child, young adult. Lyra was 200, I think, in the first game and complained about being barely considered an adult. About 200 to 400 is the time you're expected to explore the universe. Some become indentured servants to pay off debt, exotic dancers, have relationships with other species that don't live so long. Humans to an Aseri are a blink compared to the 800-year lifespan of a Krogan. Around 400, they start to feel some baby fever and want kids. After about 700 you're considered older and wiser, probably, so you can lead councils and do diplomatic things. I don't have the law in front of me, so the years are a guess. I think they did a great job with how an Aseri would live their long life. Hopefully a group of people to run checks and balances of power. Think about how much power influence Mitch McConnell has amassed in his couple decades in the Senate. Think about how much power and wealth Jeff Bezos amassed in 20 years. Now scale that up by a factor of 10. Definitely would need a group of people running checks and balances. Maybe even adding a hard limit to how much money you can have. I think people would have different attitude towards museums. Visiting museums would be more like a nostalgic trip instead of learning about history. Watching famous paintings from 1600 would be like seeing memes from 5 years ago. Incest preventer. Imagine the colossal family tree where you can be a great-great-grandparent and happen to be interested in a family member who you may or may not know is a family member. Mostly likely one person forever is going to become obsolete and you may have tens or hundreds of spouses over the 1000 years. If human lifespan was that long, we would probably behave like elves do in fantasy literature, and advancement of science would be slow since it would be up to few passionate individuals. Often elves are pretty xenophobic too since ideas dilute over generations. I think many people would have been farmers and we would be having brutal wars for the land areas since we couldn't ever risk starvation for our people. I am fairly sure that if humans lived 10 times as long, many of us couldn't even read and electricity probably wouldn't have been invented. The job for finding how to shorten lifespan. The job for complex calculation will be created. Therapist will have a harder job. I feel like healthcare would get a step up. Now there's more people who get ill or injured since the lifespan is 1000 years. Well, for one, I think our education system would be way more lax if we had 10x the amount of working age. Like they'd probably start serious education later and let you have a good 10 years of fuckery before college. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.